Do the hands match the walks? Like, is there like, what if you're an axer and a charger? Then you're an axe murderer, right?
Keep doing it. Please. Keep doing it.
The cleaver types are traditionalists. They're focused on logistics. They're focused on security. That particular classification is called the supervisor. It's your kind of stereotypical middle manager type.
So welcome, everybody. So to say that today's guest, Dr. Andrew Winkler, is a smart guy is quite the understatement. He has a PhD in mathematics. He was a National Science Foundation fellow. He's an author. He taught his first college class, wait for it, at the age of 15.
What?
I know, right? In fact, one researcher called a young Andy one of the truly finest minds we've ever encountered.
Why is he here?
This is a smart guy who thinks on a whole different level
Right.
than the rest of us. But interestingly enough, he's not here to talk about your mind. He's here to talk about your heart. Yeah. So I'm sure you've heard about the 5 love languages. And if you don't know what they are, we'll cover them in a moment. In true mathematician style, Andy figured out that number's wrong. There aren't 5. There are actually 8. And the 3 that we're all missing are the 3 most important ones. So Dr. Andy, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words, and thank you for having me here.
I mean, it's really cool having you here. Mark talked about all those fantastic things that you did, and you're a mathematician. And what made you get into the study of love?
Right.
Why did you
It's
do
like
that?
180 degrees.
There's a pattern you may have heard of. It turns out typically when a relationship falls apart, the next relationship lasts about half as long.
Really?
And,
I didn't know
yeah,
that.
I don't know that anybody knows the reason for this, but it's a recurring pattern. I had a relationship that was starting to kind of enter a rocky phase. So I learned some things about personality, trying to get some more insight just kind of into, kind of how we all work. And that actually extended the life of that relationship for another 5 years. Because what I learned was that everything that I loved about her was inseparably connected with everything that annoyed and frustrated me about her. That the two were inseparable. They were two sides of one coin. And
Isn't that always
That
the
sounds
way?
counterintuitive.
so I started trying to find everything I could that would tell me, how can I fix this? How can I make this better? And one of the things I read was the book on the 5 love languages. It turns out that we not only do we have to feel loved, we have to not feel unloved.
So you study love languages. What is your definition of love?
Yeah. Well, so one way of saying it that I think was a Covey notion is that love is a verb, not a noun. And so it's the way we act that shows that we're thinking about someone and caring about them. And on the other hand, the way we feel loved is when we notice people doing things which, if we were to do them, would mean that we were thinking about someone in a way that shows that we care.
I love that.
Processing that.
It's a verb.
Yeah. No, love's definitely
Yes.
a verb. But at some point, I heard you say that the golden rule, like I would do that for someone because that's what I want somebody to do for me. I would treat my wife this way because if she did that for me, then I would know that she's loved.
Like
But
golden rule.
right. But I think
Yeah,
I mentioned that's
exactly.
a relationship killer.
Yeah, that's a mistake that we all very easily make. And a simple example,
Right.
a simple example is that if I'm following the golden rule, I'm going to cook a delicious steak dinner for my vegetarian friend.
Okay.
And
Because
because that's what I would have done for me.
right.
But it not only would they not appreciate it, they would likely be offended by it. Because it very clearly shows that I don't know them and that I don't care about their desires and feelings and preferences.
Got it.
These love languages, I talk about it as like wavelengths or frequencies. Because if you're sending on one wavelength and they're tuned into a different wavelength, they're not hearing your show. they're not experiencing love. You're not having the impact in terms of lifting their life that you want to have because you love them.
You read the love languages book and you thought to yourself, there needs to be more love languages at
We're
that
missing
point,
some.
or we're missing some.
Yeah.
I knew a lot of friends that I knew their personality types, and we had conversations about the love languages.
Should we reel it back and do what the 5 love languages are? Just
Yeah,
for
and I
anyone.
was
Is
about-
that what I knew you were going to do?
I
that.
want to
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about it because
Yeah.
the 5, just to list them, are
Yeah.
to give words of affirmation, to spend quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and receiving gifts. So, what are the 3 that we're missing?
It's a little more subtle than that,
Yeah.
because so each of these 8 functions
Yeah.
has a love language. For extroverted thinking,
Right.
it's this acts of service sort of thing. For the extroverted sensor, that's the one that's touch, but also any kind of pleasure of the senses. For the introverted sensor, they're more focused on their memories, and so for them, what will really make them feel loved is feeling remembered, knowing that you remember them and that you value your memories with them and that you share traditions with them and so on. Then for the introverted thinker, it's in a sense it's quality time, but it's specifically the quality time of exploring ideas together. The next one is the feelers. Extroverted feelers are always thinking about the value of things in the external world. Particularly relationships. You could call them connectors. So this is the quintessential quality time person. They just like being with people and doing things with people. Because there's also introverted feeling, which is sort of unifier or conscience. Basically, it also cares about relationships, but it is more focused on the group than on the individual. And so the introverted feeler cares about values, and cares about things that would be disruptive to the harmony of the group. The final is intuition, which again comes in 2 forms. The extroverted form of intuition is the brainstormer, constantly coming up with ideas and variations on a theme. And for them, the love language is actually surprise. And so it can look like gifts, but it's specifically the surprise facet that they're responding to. But my first wife had an exquisitely well developed brainstormer function, and she 1 year she threw me 2 surprise parties, one weekend after the other, because she knew I would figure out the first one,
Nice.
but she thought
That's so
there was
cool.
a chance
Yeah.
that the second one would still be a surprise.
funny.
What's the final one?
Yeah. So then the other version of intuition is introverted, and that is a really interesting function. It's called the seer, and what it does is it processes symbols, and as a facet of that, it foresees the future or foretells the future, constructs a vision of the future. It's tricky because 8 is a big enough number
Yeah.
that there's a lot to wrap your head around.
And everyone is nuanced, for sure.
Yes.
Let's talk
Yeah.
about the different walks, and 4 different walks, 4 different gestures. I've heard you mention that in prior.
Yeah. So
What is that?
to optimally use this, you want to be able to figure out, what their frequency is, which means you want to be able to figure out what their most mature function is,
Right.
and also what this gesture function of theirs is. And to do it can be tricky, but there are a couple of ways in which people just telegraph what their particular um, frequencies are, their cognitive functions. And so one of the ways is by the way they walk. One kind of walk is reminiscent of a charging bull. It's somebody who walks energetically. Typically, their neck is leaned forward, like they're lowering their horns. They are very focused, looking straight ahead, goal directed, not distracted at all. And those people are characterized by kind of 2 things. One is that they tend to be focused on giving and taking, mostly giving orders, and not so much on asking or answering questions. They tend to kind of ignore those. And they're also initiators, which is to say, in new situations, they jump in. They will be the first to approach someone who's a stranger to them, and their sort of motto is that it's worth it to go ahead and take action. There's also a related one, which I refer to as a glide. And this is a very kind of honed, energy conserving, smooth way of walking. also forward focused and not distracted. But instead of feeling full of energy, instead it feels very conserving of energy. And there's a great example of this if you've ever watched Game of Thrones. In the very beginning of the first episode, the first season, Lady Stark is walking through the castle, and it's almost as though she's walking on what I call them flatellators, those people mover things they have at
In the
airports.
airport, yeah.
It's almost like she's on one of those. It's
Yeah.
such a smooth walk.
Okay.
Um, and so these people also are tend to be focused on giving and mostly taking orders, but tend to ignore questions.
Interesting.
But they're responders. They tend to hang back, waiting for someone else to initiate an interaction.
Gliders or
And
takers?
So how does that the glider and the charger, how does that relate back to the love languages or how to approach them? You said that's their walk is telegraphing who they are and what frequencies they're on for these love languages. What's the connection?
You have to both look at the way they walk and also the way they gesture. And between those two pieces, that provides all the clues that you need.
So as an Italian,
Okay.
Are we
I
going to talk about
gesture-
gestures now?
I gesture quite frequently. Give me an idea of what you mean by the gestures.
When people gesture, there are characteristic ways they use their hands. And for one type, they use their hands like their claws. This is the characteristic gesture of the knowledge seeker. So another type you'll see looks like this.
Jazz hands.
Yeah.
And
Spirit fingers.
so a really great example of this is Bernie Sanders. If you ever watch him talk,
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
He's always
Does this
using
all the
his
time.
his hands like they are wings, or perhaps fins. So that's very characteristic of an identity seeker, or idealist is another way they're described. Another way they're described is catalyst, because they tend to be the ones who, kind of make things happen in certain ways. Those are actually less common. More common are the poke, using your finger like it's a stick. That's characteristic of sensation seekers. And then finally, there are people who they use their hands like it's a cleaver. And
Oh God, that's
they-
me. This is how I talk all the
It
time.
is. He does that.
I
What's
bang the
wait,
table.
wait.
I
What
get
is
in
it?
trouble.
Is it bad?
No,
It's bad.
it's not.
this is characteristic of security seekers.
Not a secret.
And
That's funny.
and then they also will gesture like they're holding reins in their hands, like they're riding a horse. I have no idea why for
I
any of
love it.
these. It's just it's a pattern that David Kiersey noticed.
But I know people are going to be like, source.
Yes, yeah, David Kiersey wrote about this.
Okay.
He's written really insightfully on temperament, which is what the gestures are about. We haven't talked yet about the stroll form of walking. Let's go back to that.
I
So
kind of bounce when I walk, I think.
yeah. So the bounce. Think of Tigger. Think also
I'll
of
never not think of Tigger when I
Oh,
see you
boy.
now.
Now look what you've done,
think,
Andy.
think also. I know. I'm sorry.
The wonderful thing about Stacey. Stacey's a wonderful thing.
So let me emphasize, all of these are awesome things, because there are superpowers that come along with each of these combinations.
What's the
and
bouncer
so-
superpower?
Oh, God.
I need to hear this.
The bouncer superpower is that Linda Behrens calls them "get things going,"
That's you.
and
That is totally
so
you.
true.
I love it.
and their
I'm a
their
plumber, too.
outlook is it's worth it to get people involved and motivated. And so their ability to basically raise an army makes them able to make things happen in ways that other people can't. And a lot of times, entrepreneurs, for example,
You're making her feel way
I feel
too
really
good.
good right now. What's the bad
Way
part?
too good.
well, you're less likely to plan, because that's pretty much opposite your inclinations. When you're not at your best, you tend to kind of descend into chaos.
Oops.
You can
Where's
He's
your
nailing
husband?
it.
I
He's
wanna
nailing it.
you can think of, and so you need to focus when that happens.
Boy. Squirrel.
And but see, the thing is, each of these interaction styles, as Kiersey describes them, has specific sort of superpowers, but also specific pitfalls. The glide sort of walk is characteristic of people who tend to be too easily frightened. the charging bull walk is characteristic of people who tend to be too confrontational.
Bossy.
And the stroll is characteristic of if you ever saw The Invention of Lying with Ricky Gervais, he's kind of a good example of what Linda Behrens refers to as the behind the scenes interaction style. So these are people very focused on answering and asking questions, tend to ignore orders, and the kind of and they're also responders, whereas the Tigger type is initiates interactions with others.
I'm trying to find out what Mark does.
I can answer that.
Go.
My question was, what happens when a stroller marries a lion? What was it called?
Charger.
A charger. I am a
that's
charger,
actually-
100%,
Oh, he's
and
a
my
charger.
wife is a stroller.
He's totally a charger.
That's actually ideal,
Oh, there
because
we go.
what
Love you, honey.
happens is, I mean, so first of all, they're obviously a person who is oriented towards giving and taking orders and ignoring questions, with a person who is oriented towards answering and asking questions
we're complete.
and ignoring orders. There will be conflict there,
love
but there will also be balance.
Do the hands match the walks? Like, is there like, what if you're an axer and a charger? Then you're an axe murderer, right?
Keep doing it. Keep doing it.
The cleaver types are traditionalists. They're focused on logistics. They're focused on security. And so they have either as their most developed function or as their second most developed function that introverted sensing, which is scanning memories and trying to make sense of them. But if they're the charging bull type, they're actually using extroverted thinking even more than they're using that facility.
Wow. Well, there you go. That makes a lot
And
of sense.
so that particular classification is called the supervisor. It's your kind of stereotypical middle manager type. And we live in a world that's run on natural selection and sexual selection. And it turns out that those 4 gestures are actually tied to sexual selection, and those 4 walking styles are actually tied to natural selection.
Whoa.
And
that's cool how you just did that.
Okay.
Yes.
And so
I wish I was smart like Andy.
So do I.
Aw.
No, I meant I
Thank
wish
you.
you were smart.
Blush.
Shut up.
Yeah.
You know I love you.
Sorry, Andy. That was wonderful. Don't listen to him.
Okay.
What's next for you?
Well, I'm busy trying to write up, various about these love frequencies. I also have written a book about how Newton came up with his ideas using what he knew from Fermat and Galileo and Kepler, and how you could have done it yourself, potentially, if you understood high school algebra.
Well, obviously me.
I did
could've.
not understand.
Yeah,
high school
absolutely.
algebra.
That's amazing.
I'm living high school algebra right now, and I don't understand.
So what do you?
But
right now you have books or you have a podcast?
I have a podcast now. I Get It with Dr. Andy.
Okay.
Where I talk about all of these things,
Nice.
everything that crosses my radar screen that I think is interesting. And I also made a mathematical discovery that's very elementary, but I find very beautiful, which is that it turns out that there's one little mathematical idea that you can use to generate all of the different things that people study in mathematics. And so it kind of gives it's kind of like a unified, grand unified theory of math.
That sounds like a
gives you-
huge deal. Have you not?
Yeah. Are you
published
dropping?
that,
Are you dropping
peer-reviewed?
that? You're dropping that here?
Right.
Like,
Did you just announce this
do,
to the
do
world?
we just have an announcement?
Well, I've mentioned it to people who ask questions on Quora, so it's not breaking news,
Fine.
but you will probably publicize it far more
Maybe.
That's fair.
than people
We're gonna have
looking
people
for
knocking on
technical
your door.
answers to math
I love
questions.
That's cool. And how can we reach you? Where can we find
Yeah,
you?
where can people find you?
So there are some links on the Now I Get It with Dr. Andy podcast.
Got it.
And there's my LinkedIn page. I'm on Facebook.
I
So,
find you.
Yeah,
Yeah, those are all
We'll
great
find you.
places.
that's awesome. Well, we can't thank you enough.
Thank you for spending time with
This
us
has been
today,
great.
Andy.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, and
Appreciate
thank you
you having
guys
me.
for watching. We will see you again soon. Bye. Wait,
Take care.
like this, right?
Oh.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.